our next panel. We'll have Eva Kaili, a member of the European Parliament from the S&D Group in Greece, Bart Groothuis from Renew and the Netherlands, Michiel van Bellingen, who's the chairman of the Belgian telecoms regulator and BEREC chair this year, and Ben Reschner, the chief economist and head of public affairs of Vodafone, who will be discussing the role of 5G connectivity in driving Europe's economic recovery and growth in the aftermath of COVID, and how Europe can become more competitive. A bit what we talked about before, but in a more specific connectivity, telecoms, and mobile sector related way. And really, how do we accelerate 5G deployment in Europe? And maybe, Ben, I'll allow you, when you get the floor, to maybe address what Anthony just said about the case for 5G. I'm sure that will be interesting to hear from you as a member of the sector. But without further ado, Eva Kaili, if you're with us, you can take the floor. Is Eva there? If not, all right. We'll give Eva a second to join us. So yeah, we'll start with Bart Groothuis from the European Parliament, please.
Thanks. Thank you for giving me the floor, and I'll try to make some brief remarks on how the political discourse in Brussels is developing around 5G, as many things are crossing our path right now. So let me first say that I think that 5G is part of the nerve system of our future societies. That's the first thing I'd like to say. It's not just technology, it's also a political, strategic, and also a military playing ground. We have to think about it differently than we did in 4G. As virtualization layers, I was director for cybersecurity for 7 years at the Dutch Ministry of Defense, and I've intensively studied 5G and its risks. But I don't just want to say it's risky. It's risky business. There's a huge potential here. But first, we should touch on some of the risks, because technology has become part of politics. It's become part of geopolitics. Where in the old days, we used to have geography defining what is geopolitical, interesting, and relevant, like the Himalaya between India and China, two completely separate civilizations. And now the Chinese can actually be in vital infrastructures around the world, not hindered by any geographical boundaries. It's a new way of thinking. So I think that many politicians should involve and get involved in technologies, make sure that we understand that, and we make sure that we get our values in that. And I'd like to discuss exactly that. Let me first just also start on making 5G very small, because this might seem a very big theme I just grasped, but it's also very local. Everything is decentralizing, right? Data is decentralizing, its analytics is on the edge. 5G is in that sphere, but energy production is in that sphere. I think that we could solve traffic jams, and as it all decentralizes and makes and becomes more local, it could give a huge boost to local economies and regions if they would say we want to be the first, if they say we want to solve traffic jams around our big cities because we want to profit from it, and make sure we are more interested, that many companies are interested in settling in our industry. So municipalities, local governments, they can, if they move fast and first, they can really benefit from 5G and its development. And I'm not sure if everyone sees that. People talk about smart cities, but it's much, much more. And I think the potentials in local politicians, as I see it, in my party, for example, in the Netherlands, one of the most connected and most digital societies in the world, it's very moderate what local politicians see in the potential of 5G. They know something about it, but I think that we can do more about it. Now, then I think that now back to the subject of 5G and how we look at it in Brussels. I think that, of course, the supply chain. Let's talk about the supply chain. The 5G toolbox that the Commission has set forward is a great example. I'm a rapporteur on the cybersecurity legislation in Europe, and I've tried to endorse the copying of the 5G toolbox supply chain review into that directive. Right? We are trying to make sure that the supply chain review in 5G is copied for airports, for ports, for harbors, for facial recognition. That we want to make sure that we have like-minded countries dealing with the technology, because there's huge risk, not just in 5G, but it's a broader term. So 5G has enabled us, our thinking in Europe in a more broader term. I'm able to transport that thinking into the NIS, the Networks and Information Security Directive, which I'm rapporteur of, and I'm very grateful for that. And now Open RAN comes along. That's very interesting. Another commission is saying, what should we do with it? Because we had two world champions, Nokia and Ericsson, and now we are engaging with many others if we are virtualizing that software layer. And now what do we do? And there's huge supply chain risks there as well, but especially from the Japanese and from the Americans. And how do we deal with that? And personnel is coming over the floor to reach into the core of your networks. And how do we deal with that counterintelligence threat, with that? And I see there's two ways that we are looking at it. First, it's a huge benefit for competition, because anyone can access it, also small companies. And then we have the security point of view there as well. And I'm worried about some protectionistic views on this one, that we use it for protectionism. And I want to make sure that we don't do it. The last remark, Magnus, if we want to make 5G a success, and if historians want to see the way we handle this period, this time period in 5G and managing it politically as a success, then we have to now engage in 6G, its successor, because many of the standards in 5G have already been set. Okay, Open RAN, we can still discuss, but the new standards in 6G, that's what I find interesting. And then Nokia and Ericsson have a specific responsibility in Europe. That's how I see it. If they become champion, I think we want to make them become a champion, and we give them funds through Horizon 2020 and other benefits, then fine. But other European nations have to profit. I think that we have to make sure that other universities are involved, that ecosystems, knowledge, research and development is spread across Europe, and that we make sure that we don't just grasp how we make money, but also how we actually build these systems. And not outsource it to India, but make sure that we as Europeans know it, that we have the knowledge, that we have the best nerds in the best sense of that word to develop our own technology in future. Because that is what we're working towards, to make sure that we are more digitally sovereign. And that is what I'm trying to do here and support that big movement as well. And I'd like to conclude with that, Magnus. Back to you. And if there's any questions, I'll be answering them later with pleasure. Now.
Sure, there will be lots of questions. Thank you, Bart. I think you tapped into a lot of the thoughts that are currently swirling around in all our minds. But I appreciate the fact that you started with the frame that a lot of the people that deal with this won't necessarily be sitting in these discussions or have a view on the security, 5G, etc. So I think it's important to remind us that there's a world out there as well outside this meeting room that we might have to start at a basic level with. But without further ado, I'd like to move on to, I see Eva Kylie is just joining, which is fantastic news. And maybe while Eva gets set up and gets all the tech working, we can then hear from Michel Bombellian from the VIPT and BEREC perspective on what's on your mind.
Thank you very much, Magnus, and hello everybody, and thanks to the European Internet Forum for this invitation. I'm very honored to be here with you today on behalf of BEREC. And for BEREC, a key policy objective, if not the key policy objective for the coming 5 years, is promoting full connectivity in line with the European regulatory framework. This means prioritizing work that improves the general conditions for the expansion and take-up of secure, competitive and reliable, very high capacity networks, both fixed and mobile, across Europe, while ensuring a smooth transition from legacy infrastructure. And 5G, of course, is a topic that BEREC will keep monitoring actively and closely as the market develops. We focus on issues related to 5G, such as coverage indicators or EMF, but also what I should call the less visible aspects, such as backhaul and copper switch off, which is important too. So over the past years, BEREC has identified many aspects of regulation that are involved in the 5G ecosystem. And this work has resulted in several reports ranging from infrastructure sharing to the role of regulation in enabling the 5G ecosystem. And last year, finally, at the end of the year, BEREC published a report that contained an overview of a regulatory issue that we anticipate related to 5G services called the 5G radar. And this BEREC 5G radar and the accompanying guides seek to help national regulatory authorities to anticipate the issues involved, support the pace of innovation to be optimized, and ensure proper steps are taken on time by taking into consideration developments in the market. I cannot speak on behalf of the Commission. Anthony is there for that, but I think that the Commission is very clear about what needs to be done to recover our society, accelerate fiber deployment and the rollouts of 5G networks as well. And I think that in 10 years' time from now, we will all acknowledge that this COVID pandemic and the Next Generation EU Fund have played an impressive role in promoting a boom in supply and demand for digital and technological goods and services. However, we all know that to mobilize investments, we talk about huge investments, both in fixed and mobile, you need an efficient system. You need harmonized rules in Europe. And all those investments in gigabit networks will happen in backdrop of the European Electronic Communications Code that kicked into effect half a year ago. Well, I can assure you that on behalf of BEREC, that BEREC will do its utmost and is still doing its utmost to ensure that our overall objective of a consistent application of the European regulatory framework in the field of electronic communications is reached. And as a matter of fact, you probably know that we published our final set of guidelines stemming from this code, and this one regarding broadband mapping, and just a few weeks ago. And overall, BEREC issued over dozens of sets of guidelines aiming to ensure this consistent approach on the implementation on the code. And maybe I'd like to mention the main changes. Well, this code has also changed the role of national and international regulators, because I see that we are moving away from the very clear-cut concept of a principle-based regulation based on competition law, and we are moving now towards a regulatory framework with additional pieces of soft law, such as the Commission recommendations, the connectivity toolbox, BEREC guidelines, and an overall focus on sustainability. And all this will have an effect on promoting full connectivity over the European Union. I already mentioned the connectivity toolbox, but we are anticipating also the review of the broadband cost reduction directive. Anthony mentioned this as well, to be an additional instrument to fostering the rollout of networks, and we provided an opinion on this as well. And finally, another key driver of innovation in investment is the state of the network infrastructure. And this is also linked to the geography and the population density in the member states. Because in the past, regulators were mainly concerned about fostering innovation through the so-called ladder of investment. Whereas now they have a broader concern on societal needs, which requires additional elements of industrial policy and a green focus as well to be considered. And in the backdrop of this pandemic, this additional societal layer has even increased more actually. And this will, of course, also have an impact on the way we, as regulator, will look other markets in the coming years. I will stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Magnus.
Excellent, Michel, and much to react to there. I'm sure Ben will hopefully go at the end and give us some industry views on all of this. I'm just going to check if Eva is online and with us and ready to bring her contribution. Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Welcome to the floor, Eva.
Thank you so much, and I'm very happy to be with you and among good friends that they work hard on this digital agenda. So let me say that I think it's very important to discuss about how Europe now can increase its infrastructures for the digital age, since we are all facing these challenges of the pandemic, and we understand how connectivity was crucial in order to respond to this pandemic. It demonstrated the central role of digital technologies in the economy, but also in our daily lives. So I believe that since we had to deal with extra traffic, we remember that we couldn't have teleworking possibilities. We didn't have very stable connectivity to do business, or for e-learning and education online, also for important social activities from streaming or even gaming. To video calls and discussions and telemeetings, even to be able to trace the spread of COVID and analyze big data in order to be able to come into conclusions on how to respond to the pandemic through artificial intelligence systems. I think we realized that telecommunications, networks and connectivity are more vital than ever. And I see, Bart, with us that we have been keeping very high on our agenda the cybersecurity, that I think it's really essential for the deployment of 5G, in order to have also resilient hybrid broadband communications. I would like to say that since the Commission requested actually that we will have a certification SIM, and also for 5G networks to address all the risks that could be related to technical vulnerabilities of the networks and further enhance their cybersecurity, we've seen that we are working in parallel on several files in order to achieve that. So for the deployment, I think what's really important is to understand that basically for the deployment of any technology, we have to be able to make sure that we'll have a cybersecurity SIM there to make sure it's deployed in a safe way for citizens. The fifth generation of telecommunication systems, once it's deployed, because now I see a lot of discussion on 5G, but we realize it's just like a very enhanced 4G. I think it would be very wise if we have a strategy on how to be deployed. So if it's going to be corridors, because for the proximity reason, because it needs to be every 50 meters, I think it's more realistic to talk about corridors of 5G and start discussing the 6G. Even now, connectivity. I think we have to have this strategy to unlock the potential of these technologies, especially where its value would be at the maximum, and it will have the impact to achieve all these expectations up to 2 trillion of incremental gross output between 21 and 25, it's being mentioned. And on the same period, we expect to create and transform 20 million jobs across all sectors. So I think this is a foundational technology that could enable also other technologies in their convergence across all the value chain, from chipset makers to infrastructure developers. And it could also unlock new products, new services, even new businesses based on this high bandwidth IoT and ultra low latency capabilities. I know that also Breton mentioned that security is at the core of the 5G technology rollout. I would say the same, since we are also conducting studies on how it can be safely deployed and address all the concerns that are being raised. But at the same time, we will have the EU 5G toolbox that would support all these efforts to optimize the security. On the funding, just let me say, because I don't think I have much time, it would be better to have a discussion, that the Commission and the member states, they have identified that 5G is a key area for investments for the recovery and the resilience facility. Of course, how could it not? After the pandemic, I think our priorities maybe changed a lot. And it has allocated a significant share of its 150 billion digital budget to finance the 5G network infrastructure. And EIB has already funded a lot of 5G projects across Europe. So I think it could play a role also to our sovereignty and competitiveness. There is a geopolitical dimension. I don't know if we should mention now our concerns, but I think it's really important to make sure that we will have safe software and hardware developments, and we will make sure that Europe will have control of not just the infrastructure, but also of the metadata that someone can have access to if they are a provider of this network. So I think in order to have, you know, the safety also for citizens, it's really essential to, let's say, to talk about the European sovereignty in deployment of 5G, and also to make sure we can have our sphere of influence beyond our EU borders to the MENA region, I would suggest, in order also to take the maximum of this valuable deployment of this network. Finally, I would say that we need to urgently invest in the pan-European high-speed connectivity and also infrastructure, and we need to increase the funding for quality networks. So these funding opportunities should also come perhaps to support with measures that could support low-income families in order to be able to, you know, to participate. We have to take this under consideration because it's really an expensive technology. So we have to see also who will have to pay for that, who will take this cost. And member states should also be encouraged to award 5G spectrum frequencies to secure a timely deployment of high capacity network. I think there should be a central authority that would make sure that it's deployed also in a proper manner and a safe way. And also to ensure effective and transparent processes that would permit the accelerated rollout of the very high capacity infrastructures. So I think that would be my initial comments. I'm sorry if I took more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, and lots of, again, food for thought. And you know, Ben, you've had your fill now of political and regulatory, etc. Ideas of what should be happening, and particularly on this panel from 5G, the post-pandemic world, through cybersecurity and 6G. So you have a lot to cover off. But I mean, I'll let you set out your stall first, and then we can get to questions and a more discussion format afterwards. Please, Ben.
Thank you, Magnus, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a little bit daunting to go after so many distinguished speakers and such a variety of views, but actually a lot of common views, but still some subtle differences nonetheless. So yeah, let me just give an operator perspective. Hopefully I do talk on behalf of a number of operators. I can't guarantee that I do, but then I give the Vodafone perspective, but also where I think a lot of the industry is aligned. First, I mean, we're talking about 5G connectivity. So the first thing I'd like to stress, and I think this did come up in a couple of interventions, is that it's not just a next generation in terms of bandwidth. The important thing is to distinguish between 5G and other technologies in terms of what we see as three fundamental additions. It's the ability to slice, so having separate parts of the network dedicated for specific uses, the latency, the low latency, giving different applications, and also the integration of edge cloud, so bringing cloud much closer to the end user. And these are fundamentally different capabilities which will drive new use cases and really be part of Industry 4.0. And I think this is part of what this panel is meant to be about, how 5G can drive the economic recovery. Industry 4.0 is going to be a really important part of that. And when we think about the data analytics as well, as being referred to by quite a few people, new capabilities on network, new capabilities on data analytics, you put it all together, it is a very big opportunity. Of course, there's risk, but also a massive opportunity to accelerate our industrial progress in Europe and beyond, obviously. But when we look at it, I want to bring in the perspective of what we've actually gone through in the last 18 months or so, we've already seen a massive acceleration of digitalization. So we're talking about accelerating digitalization. It's already happening. It's all around us. It's what we're doing today by being on this panel virtually, and also some people lucky enough in Barcelona. It has accelerated already. But now when you put that combined acceleration with the change in the way industry will be functioning, I think it was Bart who referred to this as the nervous system of the entire industry, and everyone has agreed digital infrastructure is absolutely critical to this. We get the combination of a new way of doing industry and accelerated digitalization. For us, this means major disruption. So disruption can be positive, but disruption can also be negative. And just being prepared for disruption, probably in a way that we weren't prepared for the disruption that we've been through in the last 18 months, but now being prepared for the new disruption is going to be critical to make sure that we have a success of 5G, but also, as I said, Industry 4.0. And so how do we handle that disruption? And for us, we're trying to learn from the lessons of what we've been through in the past 18 months. And the specific thing is, yes, digitalization has been a lifeline. I think it was Susana Solis Perez who referred to it as sort of or maybe it was Pilar, I can't remember, who referred to it as a thread that kept everything together during the pandemic. But it also exposed some of the divides. We have to be honest about this. Connectivity, digital more broadly, can be a force for good, can be a force for bad. And if we don't address the divides, it won't be the inclusive digital society that is part of as Vodafone, as our company, that's part of our purpose. So for us looking forward, in order to make the most out of 5G connectivity, which will underpin Industry 4.0, we have to also address the divides that have been exposed during the last 18 months. And I think Anthony referred to it in terms of the cardinal points of digital compass. There's different ways of looking at divides. We just look at three simple things: people, SMEs, and regions. In people, it's about digital skills, and Victor Negrescu was very strong on the need for digital skills. We have to make sure that as Europeans, we are enabled for the digital acceleration, and the Industry 4.0 is about to come about us. SMEs must be part of that. We have to give every company the opportunity to grow and to be from a SME to a major corporate, and it's regions. We must make sure that we don't have the infrastructure gaps that we currently have. And this is three of those is where policy can play a fundamental role in closing those gaps and making sure we get the full value from what is about to hit us. And I mean, I feel a bit jealous now of Eva Kali's intervention, where she referred to an opportunity of 2 trillion euros and 20 million jobs, because we did some research, which, if I remember the numbers correctly, was 1 trillion euros and 7 million jobs if we get the digitalization right. Either way, I think we'll take 1 trillion or 2 trillion, given the payback that would imply for the Recovery and Resilience Facility of 750 billion euros. That would be a good return on investment. So we're looking for an inclusive Industry 4.0 as much as an inclusive digital society, and making sure we have the policies to support this. And I've got just 2 final points. How do we make this happen? So the first thing is the level of collaboration. And I think if you listen to the speeches today or the interventions today, the level of collaboration in terms of vision is absolutely there between industry, government, and also with regulators, with Michel, with his intervention. But I would say we all need to go hand in hand in terms of this collaboration. And I do think that at a national level, especially, some of the regulation is not quite there yet. We still see elements of old school thinking. And if I would slightly change the words of Michel, you talked about doing work on copper switch off. I'd like you to do work on regulatory switch off as well. That could also bring quite a lot of impetus into the acceleration of deployment of infrastructure. Because Magnus, you asked about the environment for us to invest. We have to be really honest here. We made an announcement in our last results that we would expand our investment in Europe, and we got hammered by the markets, if I'm perfectly honest. So we have to ask ourselves, have we got the right environment now where the market believes we can invest with confidence because it would add value? And this is where my last point: time is critical. There is a lot of money going around now, and it's superb that the Commission has the combination of the long-term vision of 2030 targets and the financial muscle now to make some of this happen. But the funds in themselves are not enough. Again, Susana Solis Perez referred to some of the gaps, which I think is a report that we commissioned from Deloitte, which shows that the funds will not be enough. So we need to make sure that every euro of public money is matched by private money, but every euro of private money gets the biggest bang for the buck. And that means policy reform, not by 2030, not by 2025. As I think it's to Axel Voss's point, speed is absolutely of the essence. We need to get this right now. We need to make sure that the money that we are dedicating to investing in 5G and investing in all infrastructure really delivers the value which will give the digital dividend to the European citizens. Because if we don't do it now, Industry 4.0 will come upon us. It will be there, but there'll be others that benefit from it. So we need to make sure we got the combination of everyone working in tandem. And I think from what I've heard today, there's a lot of thinking in tandem. The time is of the essence. We need to make sure that we do crowd in that private investment, so we get 5G connectivity everywhere, fiber everywhere, and really we then become the nervous system for a very, very buoyant, and I hope it is the 2 trillion, not the 1 trillion of value that will yield to Europeans.
Thanks, Ben. And I think your point on biggest bang for the buck will be something we can pick up with the other panelists in a moment. And as a reminder, if you want to look at what we've been talking about so far, Paolo's lovely graphic is there. You should be able to blow it up on full screen if you just press the 3 buttons in the corner and hit pin. It should come up full screen. This virtual panel has been fantastic, and let you take all those thoughts back and do some interesting policy work in your various fields. So thank you very much, and on behalf of Daniel and Pilar and the rest of the team, I'll leave you to get on with the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Magnus.